Hi guys, James at Rampant Lion Reviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one, we are going to stick to the US, but we're going to go over to Pennsylvania this time, and we're going to return to a brewery that is featured on the channel once before. So the last beer that I tried from this brewery was really very nice. This brewery was picked out for me by someone who I know knows the Pennsylvania beer scene very, very well. He certainly made a very good choice, but this particular beer is a different style from that last one that we had, a style that I very much enjoy, and one that has taken a little bit of a backseat to other things in recent years, but I do feel it's been making something of a comeback over the last little while as well, so we'll need to see how that plays out. But needless to say, I'm very curious to see how this one turns out. Hopefully it's another good beer. Hopefully it makes for an interesting review, and as always, I hope that you guys watching enjoy my take on this one as well. So, yeah, for this review then, as I said, we are going to go a little bit to the west of me into Pennsylvania. We're going to go to a little place called Camp Hill, which is to the southwest of Harrisburg in southeastern Pennsylvania, and that means that we're going to have a look at another beer from Evergreen Brewing Company. So, this particular beer is called Squirm Machine. It comes in at 7.2% ABV, and this one apparently is a West Coast IPA. So, yeah, the last one we tried was a New England Hazy, which I thought was really nice, and as I've said in my American reviews that I've been filming recently, I've been impressed with the level of body that I've been getting out of the American single IPAs, because I do feel that's something that's lacking a little bit in their European counterparts. But it is definitely nice to try a few West Coast IPAs as well, so I'm really curious to see what this one has got in store for us, and hopefully it has that nice big oily malty backbone and the big bitter bitiness that we used to associate with this style, of course. This beer was, of course, very kindly donated to me by Mr. Paul Romeli of PA Brew News. Lovely, lovely guy. Make sure you check out his channel. He brought me a few Pennsylvania beers when he came to visit me the other day, and I'm going to work my way through a few of these. I'll try and do as many of them as I can. But yeah, this is one of the breweries that he was determined that I should have a little look at, and he said that this beer is very, very good. And I do enjoy a West Coast IPA, so make sure you check out the link to Paul's channel in the video description below if you want to learn more about Pennsylvania beers. But yeah, let's crack on with this one then and see how we get on. The Squirm Machine, a 7.2% West Coast IPA from Evergreen Brewing Company in Camp Hill, Pennsylvania in the US. So, as always with my reviews then, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting though, just fast forward. All the usual links can be found in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that I've done from Evergreen Brewing Company before, and we will hopefully be able to add some more to that list at some point in the near future, but not for a wee while I would suspect. But there's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The support that you give is massively appreciated, and remember you can go into the channel homepage and search for beer using the geography tagging system. So just go in there, use the little search bar, put in your hometown, state, county, province, whatever you like. If I've reviewed beers from the area that you search for, they will pop up. Failing that though, you can check out the playlist of beers from different countries. You'll find this one in the American playlist along with a number of other things, and that is being added to quite regularly over the next little while. But yeah, check out the playlist of beers from other countries as well, because there are some really interesting things on the channel these days, and that is constantly being added to, as I've mentioned. But yeah, let's go on to my brewery notes then, and I'll tell you a wee bit about Evergreen Brewing Company. So Evergreen Brewing Company, as I've mentioned to you, are based in Camp Hill, which is to the west of Harrisburg in southeastern Pennsylvania, and this brewery opened back in 2016, and the two men behind the company are Larry Dolan and Norm Fromm, who have been lifelong friends. But both of these guys had been involved in the restaurant trade for a number of years, but they were also avid home brewers. So they ran Brewhouse Grill together for a number of years, starting back in about 2005, and this place became well known as being a spot for having a lot of craft beers on tap. I think it was 40 or so they had on tap at any one time, but also for its food. But basically, when they formed this place, they wanted to have a bar that they would like to hang out at themselves, but then the success of their bar got them thinking about turning their home brewing hobby into a commercial business. But at Brewhouse Grill, they actually operate a nano brewery today, which is called 2050 State Brewing Company, and the beers released under that label are actually sold, I believe, exclusively at Brewhouse Grill. But but I think before this, when they opened Evergreen Brewing Company, they hired Bruce Tanner to come in as their head brewer, and he had worked in Arizona, North Carolina, and also at Trogs Brewery in Hershey in Pennsylvania, which I believe is one of the biggest by volume craft beer producers in the state. But the premises is located in a former Sun Motors car dealership on the Carlisle Pike, and the brewery is in the former service bay, and they operate a 20 hectolitre brew kit there, which is about 2,000 litres, so that's going to be somewhere in the region of like maybe 15 American barrels, something like that, and they serve wood-fired pizzas and sandwiches to go along with the beer there. Fast forward to 2022, they opened a new location in New Cumberland, which they call the Farm. They grow various produces there to use in the food, and they're apparently going to focus on a wild ale and barrel program at this facility going forward. But as of September 2023, when I'm filming this review for you, these guys have produced 270 different kinds of beer according to Untappd, and that number will no doubt continue to increase as time goes on. But from having looked at what they have on their Untappd page, it seems that this brewery is actually pretty diverse in terms of the kind of beers that they're putting out there. So yeah, that's always a good sign when it comes to trying beers from breweries that you don't know. But that is everything that I can really tell you about Evergreen Brewing Company for the moment. If you want to learn more about these guys, you can check out the brewery website, you can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on, and you can check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages to learn a little bit more about all of the different beers that these guys have done. So yeah, let's go on and actually have a little look at this beer itself. So I'll just let you have a wee look at the artwork on this one before we open it up. There you can see the Squirm machine, obviously on the front. It's quite an interesting little bit of artwork. It reminds me of like some kind of anime or something like that, actually. I'm not sure if it tells you a wee bit of artwork. I did have the Untappd page open to check the hops and things in this video. Let me just see. No, it just says, even on the homepage of the website, it just says, nah, just West Coast IPA, and apparently it has a little bit of mango in it as well. I didn't realise that. So yeah, it's 7.2% West Coast IPA. This one, it's hopped with Citra and Simcoe, so these are classic American hops. Citra comes in at about 14% alpha acid. It's going to give you a bit of grapefruit, a bit of like a peachy, passion fruity sharpness, some juicy mango, and also some lemon kind of limey characters. Also can give you a wee bit of a lychee gooseberry sort of thing in a West Coast IPA. Simcoe, on the other hand, is more about a kind of big, juicy passion fruit, 12% alpha acid, and that one is, of course, American as well. Yeah, I don't think we need to say anything more, really, about this. This is a 473ml can, incidentally, 1 American pint, 16 fluid ounces if you're using the Freedom measurements. Plain silver top on the can there, and there you can see the Evergreen Brewing Company symbol at the bottom of the can, which looks very, very nice. So, yeah, let's get this guy out into the glass and see how we get on. A 7.2% West Coast IPA, apparently with a little bit of mango added into it according to the website. So, let's do this. So, for those of you who don't know, for me at least, some people might disagree slightly with the definition and so on, but a West Coast IPA tends to be one that uses barley malt for the most part in its malt base. New England IPAs will use quite a little bit of wheat and oat in their malt bases. It's not unheard of to use a little bit of wheat and oat in West Coast IPAs, but certainly nowhere near as much as New England's. And the West Coast IPAs tend to be more kind of oily in their malty characteristics, and also a good little bit more bitter than their New England counterparts, actually. And for me, the style can go two ways on the spectrum. It can be a little bit more kind of oily and caramelly, or it can be a little bit more kind of bready and biscuity. These are the two things you really need to think about with the malt bases of these beers. For me, the two staples would be, you know, Russian River, Pliny the Elder, from that way on the bready biscuity side of things, and then Sierra Nevada Torpedo on the more oily caramelly side of things. But yeah, for me, we'll just need to see how this one goes. But this looks pretty nice, actually. Before the head disappears, you can see that this beer's poured. I think we've got about 3/4 of this one out into the glass. You can see that it's poured with about a 2/3, 3/4 finger of a kind of bumpy, I would say. That is a perfect white head. I can see that with the light. But you can see the colour of this one is a kind of very, very, yeah, I'd say a kind of rich yellow, very extremely light amber. I think that's probably a fair description. of the colour of this one. So remember, the colour of your beer depends on a few things. One, the type of malts that you use. This goes a long way to determining your EBC rating. Two, length of your wort boil is also going to play a role, because the longer you boil the wort, the more the sugars caramelise, and thus you get a darker colour of beer. But any barrel aging that you do or adjuncts you put into the beer will affect its colour as well. And the mango probably will play a role in the colour of this beer, actually. But not too much in the way of visible carbonation with this one, just one or two big bubbles sticking toward the side of the glass. A few little ones going up toward the bottom of that head there, and you can see the head is just fading away to be a thinner foamy layer, but you've got that nice ring around the edge of the glass, and you can see that the beer has a little bit of that, the beer definitely has a bit of a kind of natural haze to it, actually. So yeah, West Coast IPAs kind of have that. Some of them can be quite clear. It just kind of depends, if you like. So nothing too unusual about the appearance of this beer when you consider what style it is. I think we should have a wee look at the aroma now and see what it's all about. So let's do this. Ooh, that does smell quite nice. Smells quite old school, actually. From the first impression, this beer is quite interesting. Now, one thing that has been a bit disappointing for me when I've tried West Coast IPAs in recent times is that a lot of them have kind of toned back the bitterness a little bit. And the main reason for that, I can understand why, because many newer craft beer drinkers will have come into to drinking IPAs with the New England hazies, the lower bitterness, the creaminess, and so on. But yeah, the old school West Coast IPAs had that 80, 90 IBU hit to them. The newer ones tend to have about 40 or 50 or 60 IBUs, something like that. But this one smells as if it might have a good little bit of that deep, dank character to it. So I'm really curious about that. But it does smell pretty old school, I have to say. And you can smell a little bit of the kind of mango and stuff coming out of this one. I do wonder, actually, if this is modelled after maybe Squirm from Ballast Point. That was one of the classics back in the day, and the fact that they've added a bit of fruit into it as well, because they did grapefruit Squirm was another one. The aroma of this one reminds me a little bit of that. But yeah, aroma wise, this is pretty nice, I have to say that. So let's just break it down and describe it for you that wee bit more in depth. So the backbone of the beer, there's a lovely little bit of a kind of fresh white bready bread crust coming out of this one. So yeah, lovely kind of fresh white bready bread crust in there. On top of that, you've got a little bit, there is a little carrot, a little bit of woodiness in there, and a wee bit of cracker, but I mean not overly much. I'm certainly getting quite a little bit of, you know, I'm certainly getting quite a little bit of, like, how would we say, there's a good little bit of how would we describe that? A little bit of a kind of wholemeal brown bready type character coming out of this one. You've also got quite a little bit of fluffy white bread in there as well, and the bready character actually has a wee bit of sweetness to it. As I've said, with a lot of these American IPAs that I've been reviewing on this trip over here, the American grains are just a little bit sweeter than their European counterparts. I think we definitely have to say that. But on top of that, there's certainly a little bit of a kind of sweetness coming out of this beer, a wee bit of a kind of toasty, well, maybe a little bit of McVitie's Digestive biscuity character to start off with. Then you do have a little bit of like Werther's Original butter candy, butterscotchy sort of character as well. And yeah, beyond that, I would say that you have beyond that, I would say that you've got a really nice kind of just McVitie's Digestive biscuit there. You've got a little bit of that, well, I've said that, a wee bit of a more oily kind of caramelly note in the centre of the nose there, and that'll be the alcohol, of course, coming out of the beer. So yeah, bit of a toasty brown sugar, McVitie's Digestive biscuit, Werther's Original butter candy, butterscotch, and then a wee bit of a straight up sweet caramel covering up the boozy side of the beer. So for me, the way that that goes together, I think, is really, really very nice. Yeah, I like that with this one. I think that's everything we need to say about the malty side of this beer, to be honest with you. So on the hoppy side of things then, there's the green component of this one is quite interesting, because you can smell, whenever you add fruit into beer as an adjunct, it's always going to suppress the green component a little bit, and you can smell that going on with this beer, and I think we're going to find that in the taste as well. But yeah, the three types of hoppings that you can get in IPAs, there is early addition hopping, which takes place within the first hour of the wort boil. That gives you mainly bitterness, and it also translates to a deeper, danker flavour and aroma. Late addition hopping, which takes place within the last half hour of the wort boil, that gives you quite a bright green component. Yeah, it gives you quite a bright green component, and it translates to, you get a little bit of flavour, a little bit of bitterness out of it, but mainly flavour and aroma. Dry hopping, which takes place after the wort boil is complete, that's all about flavour and aroma, no bitterness, and that translates again to a kind of brighter green component. West Coast IPAs tend to use all three types of hoppings. New England IPAs tend to rely on the latter two. Now, with this beer, you can smell that there's a good little bit of dry hopping in this one. Yeah, you can smell that there is that little bit of dry hopping in here. But you can smell also that the early addition hopping is quite apparent too. You get this nice deep dank character coming out of this beer. So there's a teeny hint of earthiness in there, a deep dank sort of piney resinous character as well, which is good. So yeah, deep dank kind of piney resinous character, lovely kind of bright floral aromaticity. Yeah, lovely kind of bright floral aromaticity in there as well. A bit spicy, so a bit surprising that there's not more hops in this one than just those two. There may well, pardon me, be a bittering hop like Columbus or Chinook or something in there right enough. That you've also got that kind of brighter, more zesty, grassy component coming out of this beer, which is very, very nice. Yeah, interesting stuff. I do have to say that. It is quite an interesting smelling beer, actually. So yeah, on the fruity side of things, if you know these hops, it is kind of what you'd expect. There's that stronger grapefruity character from the Citra. You've got a little bit of that kind of more peachy, stronger passion fruity note in there. The soft passion fruits under there as well. Juicy but still oily mangoes. And I'm getting quite a little bit of that lychee, gooseberry and lemon limey character from the Citra coming out of this beer as well. But like I say, you can smell. If I was smelling this blind, I don't know if I would guess that it was mango that had been added into this. I might think it was a kind of grapefruit or something like that, because it does have the fruity adjunct has quite a little bit of pungency in it. So yeah, the way this beer goes together, I think, is really, really nice. So it gets a thumbs up from me. I do really like how this one pieces together, actually. So yeah, as I always say, take a little bit of time to just enjoy the aroma of the beer before you get stuck into it, but I think it's about time that we try this one and see what it's all about. So this is the Squirm Machine, 7.2% West Coast IPA with a little bit of mango in it, from Evergreen Brewing Company in Camp Hill near Harrisburg in the southeast of Pennsylvania. Once again, a massive thank you to Paul of PE Brew News for making this review possible. Slàinte, skål, cheers. That's quite nice, actually. It's it's a little bit of a change of pace from the other IPAs that I've had in recent times. That's the whole can out into the glass now. But this is definitely a bit of a change of pace compared to all the hazies and stuff that I've been having over the last little while. But you can really get the fruity adjunct in this one. To me, it actually tastes a little bit more like a bit of grapefruit. That's interesting. I do like the fact that if you look on the side of the can there, they've got a little bit of a kind of coding style output in there, which is quite nice. Reminds me of CSS, actually, although if you look at the bracket at the bottom there, that's CSS. The little thing at the top is more HTML, so that's kind of interesting. But yeah, the way that the beer goes together in that regard is quite interesting for sure. Well, in the coding, that doesn't make sense. Too tired when I'm filming this review, guys, but nah, we'll see. But I was going to say the artwork is quite interesting. But yeah, back to the beer, focus. So for me, we'll go to the middle third of the palate then. You can feel this beer does have a bit of the kind of bitterness that you want from a West Coast IPA. It is a little bit more kind of old school, but it does lean more toward that kind of bready, biscuity end of the spectrum, and it does remind me, as I was saying earlier, of Squirm, but grapefruit Squirm, I would add. So let's go to the middle third of the palate then and just break the beer down a little bit, as we always do. So, the backbone of this beer, as you'd expect, it's that lovely kind of fresh white bready bread crust. That's giving you the backbone to everything in this one. As you move further forward on that middle third of your palate, you get a little bit of a kind of woody, crackery sort of note coming out of it. So yeah, woody, crackery note, bread crust in the back. Then you've got that wholemeal brown bready character coming out of it. Yeah, wholemeal brown bread in there, definitely. Then on top of that, you get a fluffier kind of white bread coming out of the beer. I do think this beer has a bit of wheat in it. It doesn't say on the American beers what ingredients and stuff are in them, which, you know, it surprises me because there's a lot of people over here that I've met complain about gluten intolerance. So you would think that they would have to list at least what types of grains and stuff they're using in it, but apparently not. So yeah, for me, this beer has, I think it's got a bit of wheat, so you can feel there's like brown bread in there, white bread, and you can feel that denser wheaty character coming out of this one too. That denser wheaty white bread. Now on top of that in the middle third of your palate, there are a few other things going on with this one. So you have a little bit of you can feel the base of that kind of the brown sugary part of the beer. There's a little bit of like a kind of McVitie's digestive biscuity type layer on top of the bread, and then you've got a kind of more oily circle right in the middle of your palate. So there's a little bit like an almost very slightly toasty brown sugar in there, but very, very slightly, I would add. Then you've got a wee bit of like Werther's Original butter candy, butterscotch further in, then a bit of a boozy caramel just sitting in the middle on top of all of that. So yeah, boozy, oily caramel sitting on top of all of that. And this beer, it does actually feel like it's a wee bit heavier than 7.2%, I will say that. But remember, the alcohol is quite an important component to the flavour in these beers. A lot of people do forget that with them. But yeah, you get that little bit of booziness that you get from a West Coast IPA, I think, is essential. But as I've said, this West Coast IPA is really more a kind of bready, biscuity leaning affair, rather than being big and oily and caramelly. So it's more of a Pliny the Elder than it is. It's more of a Pliny the Elder than it is Sierra Nevada Torpedo. Lost that name there. But yeah, that's the middle third of the palate covered in this beer. Let's go to the back third of the palate. So as I've said often, sweeter flavours will come out further forward on the palate. More dry and bitter flavours will come out further back. So the border region between between middle and back third of your palate. You get a little bit of brown bread in the base, the white bread on top, and then yeah, the back third of your palate, you can feel the bread crusty character is just kind of lingering there. So yeah, that nice kind of bread crusty character is there, but a little bit drier. You've got a wee bit of a crackery character sitting on top of it, which again is a little bit drier. You've got the wholemeal brown bready layer there, which feels a little bit lighter and more airy. The white bready layer, which is a little bit lighter and more airy. Then above that, you can feel that what I suspect is wheaty character just creeping over the top of that. And the wheaty notes actually give you quite a little bit of bitiness, I have to say that. So yeah, there is quite a little bit of kind of wheaty bitiness coming out of this one, which is quite interesting. So yeah, I do like that, I have to say. On top of everything else on that back third of the palate, you do get a little bit of yeasty character in there, so you can feel that more dense, white bready, wheaty sort of thing coming out of the beer. So yeah, denser, white bready, wheaty, kind of yeasty type note in this one, so you can feel that there. It's kind of wrapped in a little bit of an almost like peppery spicy sort of thing, which is really quite interesting. And then yeah, it's kind of just wrapped in this little bit of a honeycomb character. I always get honeycomb on the back third of your palate with the yeasty side of things for some reason, but definitely back third of the palate, the flavour is taller. Then as you come further forward into the middle third of your tongue, it just kind of condenses down and squashes together that little bit more. So yeah, the way that that goes together, I think, is really interesting. I think that concludes everything we need to say about the middle and the back third of your palate. So on the hoppy side of things then, let's have a little look at this. In the back corners of the palate, you've got a nice little bit of earthiness in there. As you move further forward, you get a little bit of a kind of herbal character, and as you push further forward, you can feel that the beer becomes gradually more floral and spicy. There's a bit of a deep, dank, piney resin sort of thing in this one. I suspect, in addition to the fact that there's, you know, a lot of early edition hopping going on here, I do suspect that there's a little bit of Columbus has been used in this one as the bittering hop. The sort of spicy character is quite distinct. But round the front curve of the tongue, you get a lighter, more zesty kind of grassy character, but it has that wee bit of wetness to it. And usually when you have this level of wetness in a kind of West Coast IPA, it's usually because they've added an adjunct into the beer. And as I say, to me, I wouldn't have guessed that it was mango that was in here. I probably would have guessed it was grapefruit, because the grapefruity character you get out of this beer is really strong. But you can always feel that when there's an adjunct of fruit added into the beer, it always suppresses a bit of the bitterness, and that's quite apparent in this beer. But yeah, that's the green component covered. Front third of your palate then, and the fruity side of the beer. So border region between front third and middle third of your palate. You get that nice little bit of brown bready character in the base, the white bready character on top. Then the base of that front third of your palate, you can feel there's a nice kind of bread crusty character in there. You get a bit of the brown bread, a bit of the white bread, and then on top of that you get that nice oily bubble where the juicy fruity esters just roll their way out of the beer. So the fruity side of this beer is quite old school. Like, it's quite an old school West Coast IPA in that regard. I mean, the fruits are doing exactly as you would expect of Citra and Simcoe in a West Coast IPA. At the back of that front third of your palate, there's a really strong, pungent, citrusy grapefruit character coming out. As you move further forward, you really get quite a lot of, I would say, you get a little bit of a peachy sharpness, but not very much. But then, yeah, it becomes a more kind of pungent passion fruit. There's an oily mango in the middle of the palate there, maybe a little bit of drier apricot and stuff underneath. But then, yeah, as you move into the front half of that front third of your palate, yeah, the beer is very much showing you more of a, it's very much showing you more of a kind of lemony, limey character. You do get a wee bit of like a gooseberry, lychee sort of thing into the aftertaste, but yeah, not overly much, I would argue. So that's quite an interesting thing to point out about this one. The beer, the way everything just kind of pieces together in this is quite interesting from that perspective. And you can feel just behind the front tip of the tongue, when the grassy esters come out, you can feel a little bit of that. As I say, I would have suspected it was grapefruit that was the adjunct in this, but you can feel there is a little bit of fruity adjunct in here from the way the grassiness is suppressed. But the further into the aftertaste you go, it does become a wee bit more pungent, which is interesting. But yeah, let's have a little look at the mouthfeel then to round off this review. I think we've concluded everything we need to say about the flavour. Yeah. So, mouthfeel-wise, this beer for me, it's mid-bodied, pushing toward the top end of mid-bodied. The carbonation's quite smooth. It has got a little touch of a kind of oily slickness to it, and the carbonation gives you a degree of crispness as well. IBU count, I'm quite happy about this. This beer doesn't shy away from being a proper West Coast IPA with that nice big bitterness, which is exactly what you want from this particular style. The malt base has a bit of dryness underneath, a bit of smoothness in the middle, and a little touch of sweetness on top, which is great. And then, yeah, the fruitiness out of this beer. You can feel a wee bit of the softness from the adjunct, and then, yeah, you've got those more pungent, fruity characters coming out of this one as well. So, yeah, the way that this beer goes together, I think, is really quite nice. So, gets a big thumbs up from me. Yeah, I like that about this one. This is really nice. So, I have enjoyed this beer, and a big thank you to Paul for getting this one to me. I think he knows I like a West Coast IPA, and I have been missing them, and this is one that he recommended. So yeah, this was the Squirm Machine, a 7.2% West Coast IPA with a bit of mango in it, from Evergreen Brewing Company in Camp Hill near Harrisburg in the southeast of Pennsylvania. So yeah, once again, thank you for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comments section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Evergreen Brewing Company as well, and we will no doubt return to these guys again at some point in the very near future. But until the next time, Slàinte, Skål, cheers. Check out my social media, check out my friend Paul at PA Brew News, and also check out these guys at Evergreen Brewing Company in southeastern Pennsylvania. But Slàinte, Skål, cheers, and I'll see you guys on the next review. Till then.